Hi, everyone. Welcome to My Weight Live. Tonight, we're talking with psychologist Dr. Michael Vallis about the psychological tools that can help us reach a healthier weight. I'm so excited to have Dr. Vallis back on the show. Dr. Vallis, thank you for joining us tonight.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
So, you're the lead author of the Psychological Interventions chapter of the Canadian Adult Obesity Clinical Practice Guidelines. And that's what we're going to talk with you about tonight. Specifically in that chapter, you say that there are many psychological and behavioral strategies that can be helpful for people trying to reach a healthier weight. So give us some examples of what those are and how they can help.
So that's a great question. And I think we can simplify it with two questions that anyone can ask themselves. And those two questions are, how did you get to be the weight you are? And by the way, Ansley, when you answer that question, it doesn't matter what your weight is. The story that you will tell will make sense. And that story will be your life story. It'll be the challenges you encountered. It will be the body you were born into. It'll be the things that happened to you and the treatments that occurred and the context of your life. So the story of your weight is the story of your life, and that's the psychological aspect. The second question is, what is your relationship with food? And when we ask that question, what is your relationship with food? We're going to understand the emotional and the relational and the coping aspects of your life. So, Ansley, the opportunity to really highlight the psychological aspects of obesity is really, I think, an opportunity to reframe obesity in a way that's much more realistic to the way people live their lives.
All right, Dr. Vallis, it says in your chapter that there is not one pathway to success, which is why goals should be individualized, and specifically talk about how important it is that the behaviors that someone chooses to focus on be ones that are consistent with that person's core values. So explain what you mean by that and tell me, how do I use my core values to find the right goals for me?
What we know about obesity management, weight management, health achievement is that the story of the average individual is, I tried and it didn't work. I tried and it didn't work. I tried and it didn't work. And so I think the reason that it didn't work is because, excuse my language, you were doing it for the wrong reasons. And so I ask people questions when they tell me that, oh, I want to start the ketogenic diet. I'm interested in this. I want to do intermittent fasting. I want to join this program. And I ask them, well, why? So I don't ask them what. Everybody in the field focuses on, what do I do? What should I do? I don't care what you do. You know what? With help, you'll figure it out, because think about the biggest bowl of spaghetti you could imagine. And every one of those pieces of spaghetti is a pathway to success. So we shouldn't look at obesity management, at achieving health as, what do I do? Thinking there's one pathway to success. Keep that image of that huge bowl of spaghetti in your mind and find the pathway that you can stick with. And so it's not as much, what do I do, but why? And what I hear when I ask someone, well, could you tell me why you're interested in this program? And what they almost always tell me is, I read about it, or I know somebody who did it. In other words, it worked for somebody else. Well, what do you know about advice giving? People who give you advice tell you what worked for them. That doesn't tell you what works for you. So the very first thing we need to do is try to personalize it. When you consider what it is that you should do or could do, I want you to pay attention to three things. One, when somebody suggests it to you, are you interested in doing it? Because if you're not, don't try. So for instance, mindfulness meditation, very useful, very, very good. Some people, when they're told about mindfulness meditation, they say the following: that kind of sounds like when I was put in timeout when I was in grade 5. Sit in the corner and just think about what you did. So if it doesn't fit, if you don't have that response of, hey, you know what, I'm actually interested in that. So that's step one. Step two is, when you try it, you're glad you did. And 3, I want to do it again. So if it resonates with you, and when you do it, you're glad you did, and you want to do it again, now you're in the path to success. What it is, I don't care. Those are what I care about. Here is the markers of success. So just like, are you interested? Are you glad you did it? Do you want to do it again? Then the output, you can stick to it. So this is we call adherence. And this is a big issue. I'll just give you an example. Recently, I've had a number of people who have said the following to me: I'm really interested in the ketogenic approach to eating. And so I've been working on this, and I'm feeling really bad about myself because I'm trying really, really hard. But you know what? I can do it from Monday to Friday. I'm really struggling to keep with the ketogenic diet on the weekend. Doctor, can you help me develop the motivation and the willpower? What do I do to try to overcome this barrier? And so I asked the question, well, can you help me understand what goes wrong on the weekend? What is it that makes it difficult to follow this diet? And the answer is something very important called life. It's Friday night and I want to relax with my friends. I have children and they have parties and events. I want to socialize with my family. And when I hear that, I start thinking, okay, so you're telling me you're failing the diet. And I'm hearing the diet's failing you.
Yes.
So you're on a pathway and you're saying, you know what, I just can't seem to do it. And so after you've tried that once and haven't overcome the barrier, you tried it twice, haven't overcome the barrier, you tried it 3 times, I believe in the 3-strike rule, then chances are it's not going to work for you. Find a path that can. And this is where I would say obesity management is about working with providers who can help you find the one thing that you can stick to. So what we do in obesity management is help people not try to be somebody they're not. So this is an issue I have around body shape and body acceptance, but be the best you are. So you can celebrate yourself, you can find dignity, worth, and empowerment. And I like the expression, bring your best. And so the values piece is really shifting the goals away from, I saw this article, it suggested that your waist should be this size and your hips should be that size and your shoulders should be the X size. And that's what I want to be. To a pathway that you can actually adhere to, develop confidence in, and then have that personal, meaningful reasons to continue with.
So really kind of what you're proposing is almost turning kind of the traditional weight loss model upside down, because usually when we talk about reaching a healthier weight, it's the what. I'm going to do keto. I'm going to go plant-based. I'm going to do boot camp. And what you're saying is I don't really care about the what as long as it's something that kind of lights you up from the inside and you're excited about doing and want to do. What really matters to me is that you're focusing on why you're doing it, whether it's being able to be around for your grandkids or and accepting that, you know, you are who you are and you got to find something that's right for you.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm glad you're sitting because I've got one other thing to finish that story. And that is weight is not a behavior. You cannot control your weight. So weight loss is not the goal. The goal is achieving health, improving your function, and establishing dignity, worth, and a good quality of life. And if you engage in these health behaviors that we're promoting, positive things will happen to your weight. But we don't know how much, and we're not particularly care because what we know is that your weight will achieve, and this is something, again, that's in the new guidelines, this concept called best weight. We would like to abolish ideal weight. We would like to abolish goal weight. And we would like to promote best weight. What's a best weight? The weight you can achieve and maintain while living the healthiest and the happiest. And if you have to compromise any of those, you have to compromise your happiness, you have to compromise your health. You can get there, but you can't stay there, or you struggle and you can't get there. That's not your best weight.
All right, Dr. Vallis, my favorite part of your chapter in the Canadian Adult Clinical Practice Guidelines is where you say, and I'm going to quote here, reaching a healthier weight involves overcoming many challenges, cravings, habits, and social pressures. And I love that because it feels really in sync with most people's experiences. You know, there are a lot of challenges out there. So what can we do about that? How can psychological interventions help us deal with those challenges?
Well, that's a great question. I think it's important to understand that change is hard, that we all have habits and patterns, and surprise, surprise, those habits and patterns are formed based on our genetic predispositions, the cultures that we grow up in, the environments that shape us. These are very powerful influences. What I really like to encourage is the following. The strongest predictor of success is not giving up. So what we need to do to answer your question, Ansley, is to find expectations and goals that we can actually achieve. So the success is in the little things, the small victories, the doable activities. So just everyone has the following. This is like your get out of jail card. You can carry this in your pocket. So never forget, your next choice can be healthier. And you never lose that. Ever. It doesn't matter what you did last night. It doesn't matter what you did last week. It doesn't matter what you've been doing for the last 50 years. Your next choice could be healthier.
You've referred several times to your doctor or your healthcare provider as a partner. And I do think that's something else that the guidelines really kind of were revolutionary in, recognizing that it's not the doctor or the psychologist, you know, dictating to the person what they should be doing, that really ideally it's a collaborative relationship. So tell our audience at home how they might get a dialogue started with their doctor and kind of work towards that collaboration rather than just feeling ashamed or feeling told like they're being told what to do.
Absolutely. So this is actually a really great story because it's actually a really great observation. And you see this in the guidelines. And the reason, by the way, so just for the audience to appreciate, how did the guidelines kind of get whatever they got right? And I think we got it right for the following reason. We recognized the bias against obesity. So at the very beginning, we acknowledged that the narrative, eat less, move more, using willpower, was the source of all the bias and discrimination against individuals living with obesity. So we took that as our foundation point. And as a result, we then incorporated the voice of the individual living with obesity into this journey. And so that, I think, would be point number one, is that really recognizing that. And I say that because part of the challenge that individuals face is that that bias is so ever present that most people have actually incorporated it into themselves. So we call it internalized bias. So you actually believe that you're weak-willed. You actually believe that it's your fault. You actually believe that you're incapable. And this is an incredibly dangerous psychological state. So I think by declaring that at the beginning, that's what's really allowed us to try to frame up an approach that is really based on respect and partnership. The second thing is I think something that I would really like the audience to know. And so I'm going to say this in a way that sounds a little bit harsh, but it's kind of true. Most people living with chronic disease in general, but obesity in specific, if you said, have you ever felt judged by a healthcare provider? They would say, like, every single time I go in. As a matter of fact, I actually don't go in. I avoid going in because of this issue. I am so sick and tired of everything being blamed on my weight. I could have my toe could be at like a right angle, and the doctor's going to say, if you just lost weight, maybe your toe would straighten out. And so this is really the universal experience. So people really do stay away. But here's the trick. Here's what I think I'd like you to know in the audience. Doctors don't mean to be insensitive. They actually don't get up in the morning and say, I wonder how many people I can really, really irritate today. They actually don't. They're actually very compassionate. Now, the problem is they've only been trained to be experts. So they tend to look at something and they want to say, what's the diagnosis? What's the treatment? Okay, here's the problem. Here's the solution. Do it. So they're kind of like mechanics in a way. That they just think that everything is solvable that way. And then they get frustrated when it doesn't work. They actually are wanting to do well. So the sort of kernel of truth that I know is the following. If you raise the issue with your doctor, they will not ignore it because doctors don't ignore what patients tell them. No, they don't ask. They're afraid to ask. Mm-hmm. They don't know what to do, and they come across as judgmental, but only because they're ignorant in the descriptive way. They don't know. When an individual raises the issue, so this is why we wrote the guidelines so that citizens can read them, print out the chapter, take the recommendations, show it to your doctor and say, I'd like to talk to you about this. What do you think about this? If you lead, the doctor will follow because that's how your doctor is trained. And we did this study, it was done in the US and also in Canada, called the Action Studies. And in Canada, we actually discovered that people waited 11 years after they started to struggle before they raised the issue with their doctor. So we're telling doctors, you got to ask. And I'd like to send the message that to encourage individuals that if they open the door, the doctors will respond. And if the doctor doesn't respond, that says something about the personality of your doctor, and maybe it's not a great fit.
All right, Dr. Vallis, according to your chapter, one of the things that many studies on weight loss have shown us is that, and again, I'm going to quote here, behavioral interventions that strengthen restraint improve outcomes, especially among people who have cravings. So tell us, what is restraint and how do we strengthen it?
We're actually talking about a David versus Goliath story. And guess what? Restraint is David. And so what we're talking about here is operating at a very basic level inside your brain. So your brain basically has two behavioral control systems. So if you think about what influences the choices that you make in a day, you have a wanting system and you have a knowing system. So what do you feel like doing and what do you know is the right thing to do? These are two independent systems in the brain. So think about your iPhone. It has one operating system. Now think about your brain. It has 2 operating systems. It has iOS 1, the very first operating system. And this one is Goliath. This is where the pleasure centers of the brain are. We call it the hedonic center or the wanting center. And this is where emotional processing happens. This is why addictions are so common. They're really where the pleasure centers of the brain get kind of taken over by a behavior or a substance. And this area of the brain is very powerful, and it sends the following messages. I want it. I want it all. I want it now. So there's the wanting component. And then just behind your forehead is the very last part of the brain to develop. It's called the frontal lobes. And this is the executive system. This is the logical brain. We go through our life really balancing this. What do you feel like? And what do you know you need to do? And so a lot of the treatment around eating related issues and health outcomes is to balance those. And the reason that I'm taking so long to set this up, Ansley, is because you have to normalize. Of course you have cravings. And of course they're going to win. The more tired you are, the more strong your cravings. The less sleep you've had, the stronger your cravings. The more stressed you are, the stronger your cravings. So expectations have to be this David versus Goliath. And then what a lot of the treatment is, and so a lot of what we do in the psychological and behavioral aspects of obesity management is try to help you develop strategies. And there are many strategies. So in the guidelines, we've been able to identify 93 independent behavior change strategies. So that's a lot of stuff in our kit bag that we could play out and help people to use. So a lot of the behavioral intervention is, again, in the same way that I said was about individuals finding their own pathway. You will find from those strategies many things that will help you. And so in a way, what we're doing is trying to help people, and I'll just give you 2 real examples. One is what we call urge surfing. So what do I mean by that? That limbic system, that emotional part of your brain, it's just exactly like a wave. It comes on, it's strong, but it fades. And so if you're thinking to yourself, let's say, oh, I have craving for X or craving for Y, just try a little experiment. Don't deprive yourself of X or Y. Just say to yourself, okay, I'm going to have it in 20 minutes. And then wait 20 minutes. You know what's going to happen? 20 minutes later, you're not going to want it as much. Somehow that craving has passed. So just knowing that, you can start to work with those craving part of your brain. This, by the way, is where a lot of the medical and surgical treatments for obesity actually have a direct effect. They actually affect that level of the brain and they turn down that craving or those wanting centers of the brain. And then we have strategies that fit what we call cognitive behavioral types of strategies that can be really helpful. And so this is where we talk about permission thoughts, just helping people to recognize when you give in, how do you convince yourself that it's okay to give in? You know what? I'm tired. I've had a hard day. I deserve it. Oh, you know what? I'll start again tomorrow. Monday's coming. So you know what? It's okay. You know, oh, I exercised this morning, so I can afford to do it. These are what we call permission thoughts. And just helping people become aware of those thoughts then allows you to really challenge them. Is that actually true? Last time I gave in, I really enjoyed eating it while I started eating it, but by the time I finished eating it, I was really unhappy that I had started it. And the next day, I was really unhappy that I had eaten this. And so then it's about trying to bring this together. Now, in this long description, the one thing I'd like to emphasize to end my description is behavior change does not happen in the context of shame or guilt. Shame is toxic to behavior change. So when we talk about this sort of wanting system and the restraint system, these are biological systems in the brain, and we really need to respect those. And so trying to get away from, oh, I failed, oh, I'm not trying hard enough, we have to sort of have a non-judgmental environment. And again, this is where obesity management comes in. And now if we look at obesity as a chronic condition, we say we've got all these psychological, behavioral strategies and medical strategies and surgical strategies. We have a number of tools that can help people.
Wow, Dr. Vallis, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us tonight. You're one of our favorite guests for a very good reason. Thank you for being here with us tonight, everybody. We will be back with you for our next show on March 16th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, talking about CBT, one of the psychological interventions that has been shown to really help people reaching a healthier weight. So you won't want to miss that show. Until then, take care and good night.